رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. اللهم اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, we'll go ahead and start with Hadith number 18 of our commentary on the 40 Hadith of Imam Al-Nawawi rahimahullah. And to get into the Hadith, عن أبي ذر جندب بن جنادة وأبي عيد الرحمن معاذ بن جبل رضي الله عنهما عن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال: اتق الله حيثما كنت وأتبع السيئة الحسنة تمحها وخالق الناس بخلق حسن. رواه الترمذي وقال حديث حسن وفي بعض النسخ حسن صحيح. So, on the authority of Abu Dharr, Jundub ibn Junada, and Abu Abdul Rahman Mu'adh ibn Jabal radiallahu anhuma, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said, have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wherever you may be, and follow up a bad deed with a good deed, which will wipe it out, and behave well towards the people. And to start off with this hadith, the first, we mentioned this before, but the first thing that we should notice is look at how compact the advice of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is. And if we remember, the title of the commentary of this book, written by Ibn Rajab al-Hamdi rahimahullah, is جامع العلوم والحكم في شرح 50 حديث من جوامع الكلم. That it's like a compilation or like a compendium of your knowledge and wisdom in the explanation of 50 ahadith من جوامع الكلم, from like the most compact and the most filled, the most dense, the most concise words. And this is because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam himself, he was given jawami' al-kalim. He was able to essentially deliver a message that, let's say for example, might take me or might take someone else, pages and pages and explanation and commentary, etc. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had this ability given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to deliver a deep message within a couple words. And this is why we see always a hadith like this, these advices are very short. It's just a couple words. And of course these couple words are very encompassing. So the first part of the hadith says, اتق الله حيثما كنت. So taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something we've gone over multiple times, and we said that taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is defined as staying away from that which displeases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that which attracts the hatred of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and angers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and trying to get close to and do as much as you can of the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that which pleases Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that which will help you on a day of judgment. So this is the definition of taqwa. And we also mentioned before examples of some of the Sahaba, like Ibn Mas'ud radiallahu anhu, when he was asked, what is taqwa? He mentioned that, have you walked on a thorny path? And the person responded, he said yes. And he said, what do you do? He said, I pick up my thobe and I try to move through this path without getting it stuck in these thorns. And he said, this is taqwa. So taqwa is this consciousness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And although again, like even in translations of the Quran or in translations of ahadith or in books, will sometimes very loosely translate taqwa as fear, or as even just the word consciousness, right? When in reality it's more encompassing than that. And this again relates to the beginning of what I said about having jawami' al-kalim, that Rasulullah is given this ability to deliver such a long speech with just a couple words, in this depth of meaning. Now, what I want to focus on here for this hadith is not just the concept of taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it says ittaqillah haythuma kunt. And again, Rasulullah does not speak وَمَا يَنطِقُ عَنِ الْهَوَىٰ إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. He does not speak from desire or anything. إِنْ هُوَ إِلَّا وَحْيٌ يُوحَىٰ. He is nothing but a wahi that is being revealed. So why mention haythuma kunt? Why mention wherever you are? The reason is because it's easy for a lot of us to have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala when we're out in certain areas or in certain environments, and then it's harder in other environments, in other areas with other different people. And the most generalized example is when you're out in public, you find it easier to avoid sins. You find it easier to carry the akhlaq that we're commanded to by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Versus, let's say, at home, or versus, let's say, in private, in seclusion. These are areas where, your nafs comes out, where it becomes harder to have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is like something we see in the Quran very often. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِذْ يَتَلَقَّى الْمُتَلَقِّيَانِ عَنِ الْيَمِينِ وَعَنِ الشِّمَالِ قَعِيدٌ مَا يَلْفِظُ مِنْ قَوْلٍ إِلَّا لَدَيْهِ رَقِيبٌ عَتِيدٌ. That when the two angels on your right and left shoulders, they're sitting waiting to write down the deeds that you do, مَا يَلْفِظُ مِنْ قَوْلٍ إِلَّا لَدَيْهِ رَقِيبٌ عَتِيدٌ. That he doesn't say anything or even pronounce anything, or nothing comes out of his tongue, except there is raqibun atid, someone who is watching and someone who's prepared to write down what you're saying. And this we see very often in the Quran. يَعْلِمُ خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ وَاللَّهُ يَكْتُبُ الْحَقِّ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He knows خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ. خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ is like, there's an example in the Seerah of the Prophet ﷺ, which kind of explains this very well. So there was a man who Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he had commanded to be killed before Fatih Mecca, and he was on a certain list that Prophet ﷺ gave, that these are certain people who they're not to be forgiven. Now, when this person was caught, in this person, and the Sahaba were waiting to ask Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam what to do with this man, and they were bringing him up to him. And the point is, the person was asking for forgiveness, etc. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam at the end forgives the person, and he says, after Prophet he tells the Sahaba, why didn't you? Is there anyone among you who would kill this person? And the Sahaba, they said, Ya Rasulullah, why didn't you just show us with your eyes? Meaning, just give a small signal. There's different ways. For example, look off to the left, look to the right, etc. Just point us, give us a small little indication. That's kha'inat al-a'yun. Kha'in is someone who's a traitor, and then a'yun is eyes. So what does it mean, betraying with your eyes? That's what it means, right? And the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he responds and he says that it's not for a prophet, it's not befitting for a prophet, someone who's at the station of a prophet, to have this attribute or do this thing of kha'inat al-a'yun. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He even knows that. So that's the significance in this ayah in Ghafir, in Surah Ghafir, of mentioning يَعْلَمُ خَائِنَةَ الْأَعْيُنِ وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala even knows that little movement of your eyes when you didn't say anything to indicate differently, you didn't do anything to indicate differently, all you did was move your eyes in a certain direction. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that. وَمَا تُخْفِي الصُّدُورِ. And then on top of that, that which your chest conceal. So anything we hide in our hearts, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows that. وَاللَّهُ يَكْتُبُ الْحَقِّ. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He judges with the truth. So, and we can go on and on with these examples in the Quran, talking about the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in these places or situations or environments where it's just you and the shaitan, or the shaitan has more control over you. So the significance of mentioning here حَيْثُ مَا كُنْتَ is because the advice here is needed, and specifically towards when you're in an environment where the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala isn't being practiced, where the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala isn't being encouraged, where having taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala makes you from the ghuraba, makes you from the strangers, where having taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is something that is difficult. And we have hundreds of examples of this today, from college campuses, from parties, from etc. These are practical things that we face today that are options on the table for us to all, environments for us to attend, and environments for us to get into. And over there, the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala isn't practiced openly. And that's why when the advice is ittaqillah haythu ma kunt, because Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam knows that in certain environments, it's easy to have a taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's easy in the masjid. It's easy when you're around people who are reminding you with the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's easy when you're in environments where this is the norm. But ittaqillah haythu ma kunt, this is where it gets difficult. Having taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in these places, and all of us can think of examples in our lives, because this is something that all of us struggle with. There's no person, no one gets to be an exception, or no one gets to be like he thinks that he has taqwa in every single place because he himself is a muttaqi, etc. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَلَا تُزَكُّوا أَنفُسَكُمْ هُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِمَن اتَّقَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, don't even do this, don't put yourself above, at a certain level. هُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِمَن اتَّقَى. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the only one who knows. He is more knowledgeable of who actually has taqwa. So the purpose is we should be thinking of the different situations or environments or even people that when we're around, the taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not the forefront of our minds. That should be something that we take practically from this advice of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and we think about those situations, those people, those environments, and we try to either avoid those environments or change them. Now, the next part of the hadith, he says, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, وَأَتْبِعِ السَّيِّئَةَ الْحَسَنَةَ تَمْحُهَا. In this, we covered more in depth, so I won't go as deep this hadith. We covered it last hadith. I mentioned a couple stories, etc. But essentially, it's saying to follow up the bad deed with a good deed. And then what will it do? Tamhuha. Tamhuha means it'll erase it. Now, the significance of this is that all of us will inevitably commit bad deeds. This is a guaranteed fact. It doesn't matter how practicing of a Muslim you are. It doesn't matter how much you, even think from this perspective. It doesn't matter how much you think a certain person is such an amazing Muslim, and you imagine you've never seen him sin in your life, him or her. You've never seen them ever in your life practice a sin very clearly. You never caught them. We'll phrase it that way. You never caught them. Because this person, in public, he has this fear of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But the point here is, even in private, you don't know. That person might be more sinful than you in private, right? So every person is inevitably going to sin. And this is a description, we mentioned this hadith many, many times because of its practical application. But every son of Adam is someone who makes mistakes, someone who is a sinner. And the best of people who sins is the person who makes tawbah. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if we didn't sin, He would replace us with a people who do sin, but then they make tawbah. So this is a point that needs to be clear in our minds. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam is speaking to this truth that all of us will sin. وَأَتْبِعِ السَّيِّئَةَ الْحَسَنَةَ تَمْحُهَا. So what should you do when you commit these sins? Because all of us will inevitably. You should follow it up with a hasana, and that will erase it. You should follow it up with a good deed, and that will erase it. And we mentioned before last week, like how ibadah in general, and we got into more detail, but how ibadah in general actually erases sins. And it erases sins that we don't even, for example, intentionally are making tawbah for by doing this action, or by turning to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and consciously, like before I pray or I make dua in my salah, etc. Even from this perspective, the salah can erase those sins that you completely forgot about. And when we think from that perspective that there are genuinely sins, right? Like if you sat down right now, this is every son of Adam. If you sat down right now and tried to recollect everything that you did was haram, every sin you committed in your entire life, you would never be able to remember all of it very clearly. Like some of us can barely remember like what you had for dinner last night or what you did, like this morning, etc. So you wouldn't be able to remember everything you did in your entire life that was a sayyah. But the point is that Rasulullah is mentioning this practical advice, and this is in the Quran as well. In al-hasanati yudhibna sayyat, that verily, like the hasana, the good deed, yudhibna sayyat, it also gets rid of and it erases these bad deeds. And that ayah is in the context of salah, by the way. So salah is one of the biggest ibadat, that it's important for us to look at it from this perspective, that this wipes away sins. It cleans them. It erases them. So that perspective is very important to have. And then finally, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he ends with وَخَالِقِ النَّاسَ بِخُلُقٍ حَسَنٍ. And approach the people, or when you're with the people, have behave towards them with a khuluq hasan is like a very good akhlaq, is like your mannerisms, etc. So in this, again, notice back what I mentioned in the beginning about Jawami' al-Kalimi. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has been given Jawami' al-Kalimi, that these few words have so much depth. Again, if you look at it from this perspective, when you're interacting with people, you have this choice of, you know, being good or being bad. And to illustrate this in a very clear manner, and to notice the significance of mentioning this advice after the previous two advices, look at a situation where someone has wronged you. Someone has, like, it's taken away from your rights, etc., or harmed you. In that situation, you have the choice to respond with good or respond with bad. And this in Surah Fussilat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions very, very clearly. He says, وَلَا تَسْتَوِ الْحَسَنَةُ وَلَا السَّيِّئَةُ ادْفَعْ بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ فَإِذَا الَّذِي بَيْنَكَ وَبَيْنَهُ عَدَاوَةٌ كَأَنَّهُ وَلِيٌّ حَمِيمٌ وَمَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا الَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا وَمَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا ذُو حَظٍّ عَظِيمٍ. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions that, you know, hasana and sayyi'ah, what we've been talking about, this whole hadith of good and evil, they cannot be equal. Respond to evil with what is best, then the one you are in a feud with will be like a close friend. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, and subhanAllah, this can't be any more true, that but this cannot be attained except by those who are patient and those who are truly fortunate. So what's the significance of mentioning this in this example? It's that when we spoke about before about, you know, the hasanat yudhibna sayyi'at, or that atbi' as-sayyi'at al-hasanat tamhuha. The reason that this order of doing a good deed after the bad deed to erase it, this is also partially true when it comes to creation to creation. And think about it this way. In our deen, you're encouraged to give gifts between your Muslim brothers and sisters to create that love for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And you're encouraged, of course, to reconcile between your brothers and sisters. And here specifically in this ayah, it's saying that good and evil cannot be equal, they never will be. In that when you are wronged, you should, and this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned in the next ayah, like we read, that only those who are patient, and those who have istiqamah, and those who have sabr, and those who have this idea that al-aqib is for muttaqeen. This is a guarantee of the Quran, that at the end of the day, the final station, the ending will be for those who have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And notice, وَالْعَاقِبَةُ لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, right? For those who have taqwa of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not just believers. So someone who has that in mind, when he's wronged, he acts upon this ayah by responding with good, because he knows that this will turn the person, by the text of the ayah, this will turn the person into waliyun hamim, like a close friend. So even this principle of good erasing evil, it's partially true even in our human interactions with other Muslims. That if someone wrongs you and you respond with good, that will soften his heart towards you. And this is a very, very, very important point. Like a lot of the times, if you take harsh stances, or you take very tough stances, whether it's like we spoke about in previous hadith, when it comes to, for example, nasiha, or it comes to enjoying the good, forbidding the evil, etc. Taking these harsh stances a lot of the times, right? And we spoke about examples where the ulama speak about that this is a requirement, right? But a lot of the times, this is something that will actually, number one, give ammo. You can explain it this way. It gives ammo to the person in front of you, his or her shaitan, to put into their heart either pride. Give him like this idea of like, I'm too honorable, or I'm too prideful, or I'm too this and too that. His ego to not take your advice or to turn away from that. You're giving his shaitan ammo to get into his heart and put this disease in there. And then also you being harsh in your advice or in your enjoying the good, forbidding the evil, etc. This is something that a lot of times will push the person away. And we spoke about how nasiha doesn't mean advice linguistically. It means two things. It can mean al-wa'd wal-irshad, which is like to guide to the right path, or to give a good reminder about the akhirah most of the time. And then the other one is ikhlas, which is sincerity. So out of sincerity for your brother or sister, even if they wrong you, it doesn't mean now it's like this person is canceled. This person, I don't want him to see him anywhere near, anything good, etc., etc. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, Irham man fil ardi, this is a hadith, Rasulullah, Irham man fil ardi yahmukum man fis sama. That if you want the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the one who's in the skies, subhanahu wa ta'ala, then irham those on the earth. Have mercy on those in the earth. Right? And of course, the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is infinitely greater than the mercy of those on the earth, because for us, you being wronged or you being someone taking away from your rights, etc., that's something that's hard to forgive. And that's another way to understand this ayah of وَمَا يُلَقَّاهَا إِلَّا الَّذِينَ صَبَرُوا, right? That only those who have sabr, have patience with, on this pushing good when faced with evil. It's because it's hard for us, genuinely. It's a humanistic thing that, there's this taste for revenge, or this enjoyment of seeing someone who wronged you do bad in life, or have something bad happen to them, which is something that, again, we need to suppress, and the Quran commands the opposite. And it's something that this hadith also is trying to advise us with. So that's all I had prepared for today for this hadith. And again, speaking about taqwa and these ibadat and how good deeds will wipe bad deeds, etc. And akhlaq, we can go into much more depth. But I wanted to just summarize it, keep it short, like a 25-minute thing, and try to make it more practical to our situation right now. So with that, any questions or comments?